Have you ever felt that distinct sensation? That quiet whisper in your gut telling you something isn't right? I've spent 40 years developing that instinct, honing it like a precision instrument. As an FBI financial investigator, I was trained to detect the subtle tells of deception, the slight shift in posture, the momentary hesitation, the answer that comes just a little too quickly. For decades, I used these skills to bring down sophisticated fraud schemes and white-collar criminals who thought themselves untouchable. Never once did I imagine I would need to use those same skills against my own flesh and blood. My name is Eleanor Blackwood. At 68, I should be enjoying the peaceful twilight of my life, especially after serving my country by bringing criminals to justice for 4 decades. 3 years ago, I lost Harold, my husband of 42 years, to a sudden heart attack. His death left me adrift in our large Boston home, surrounded by memories that began to feel more suffocating than comforting. Every corner held a ghost of our shared life. His reading chair by the window, the kitchen table where we'd shared our morning coffee, the garden we'd tended together. After months of wandering those empty rooms like a stranger, I made the decision to start fresh. I spent a year researching the perfect location, somewhere that balanced small-town charm with modern conveniences. Woodstock, Vermont captivated me immediately with its historic architecture, tree-lined streets, and strong sense of community. When I found the Victorian house on Maple Street, with its wraparound porch and bay windows, I knew instantly this would be my sanctuary. The realtor, a kind woman named Sarah, seemed genuinely pleased as she handed me the keys, commenting that the house had been waiting for someone who would appreciate its character. The day I took possession was uncharacteristically warm for April in Vermont. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass accents above the front door, casting rainbow patterns across the hardwood floors. I walked through each empty room slowly, my footsteps echoing, already envisioning how I would transform this space into my own personal haven. The master bedroom had a window seat overlooking a garden where I planned to plant hydrangeas, Harold's favorite. The smaller bedroom would become my reading room lined with bookshelves. The third bedroom would be for guests, though I secretly hoped my son James and his family might visit occasionally. I spent that first night on a blow-up mattress in the middle of the empty living room, feeling strangely liberated. For the first time since Harold's death, I slept soundly, without reaching across the bed for someone who wasn't there. The following week was a flurry of activity as furniture was delivered, utilities were connected, and I began the process of making this house truly mine. I splurged on a handcrafted oak dining table that seated 8, perhaps optimistically large for a woman living alone, but I had visions of holiday gatherings and Sunday dinners. I bought plush reading chairs, artwork from local Vermont artists, and kitchen equipment that would finally let me explore all those recipes I'd bookmarked over the years. 2 weeks after moving in, once everything was arranged just so, I invited James to visit. My only child had been supportive of my decision to move, though I detected a hint of concern about my relocating so far from Boston. James had always been protective of me, especially after his father died, checking in frequently and offering to help with household tasks. I appreciated his attentiveness, though sometimes I sensed it came from a place of viewing me as fragile rather than capable. When James arrived that Sunday, I was putting the finishing touches on a pot roast, his favorite since childhood. He arrived alone, explaining that Cynthia had taken the children to her mother's for the day. At 42, my son still had the same warm smile that had melted my heart when he was a toddler, though his dark hair was now threaded with silver at the temples. "Mom, this place is incredible," he said as I gave him the grand tour, genuine admiration in his voice. "You've done an amazing job with it." I beamed with pride as we moved from room to room. I'd worked hard to create spaces that were both beautiful and functional, balancing aesthetics with the practicalities needed at my age. The first-floor master bedroom meant no stairs to navigate as I grew older. The kitchen was designed with accessibility in mind. The bathrooms had discreet grab bars that blended with the decor. "The bathroom renovation alone must have cost a fortune," James commented. running his hand along the marble countertop of the ensuite. "And this clawfoot tub looks antique." "It is," I confirmed. "Authentic Victorian, completely restored. And yes, it was expensive, but I've been saving for this my entire life, James. This is my retirement dream." As we continued the tour, I noticed subtle changes in his demeanor. His questions became more specific about costs. His eyes lingered on details in a way that felt less appreciative and more calculating. When we reached the backyard garden with its newly installed stone patio and pergola, he grew quiet, surveying the extensive property with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "It's a lot of space for one person, don't you think?" he asked finally, his tone casual, but something in his eyes decidedly not. "It's exactly what I wanted," I replied, brushing off the comment. "Room to garden, entertain, and just breathe. After 40 years in a high-pressure career, I've earned a little breathing room." We returned inside for lunch, settling at my new dining table that suddenly felt too large with just the two of us. As we ate, James asked surprisingly detailed questions about my finances, whether I'd used all my savings for the house, how my retirement accounts were structured, if I had updated my will since moving. I answered vaguely, years of professional discretion making me naturally guarded about financial specifics, even with my son. The conversation drifted to his work at the investment firm, where things apparently weren't going well. Budget cuts, potential layoffs, mounting pressure. Cynthia was also struggling at her part-time job at the hospital. Their mortgage was underwater after some ill-advised refinancing. Michael needed braces that insurance wouldn't fully cover. Emily's private school tuition had increased again. I listened sympathetically, my maternal instinct wanting to offer help, but something held me back. That same whisper of professional intuition that had served me so well during my career. After dessert, a Vermont apple pie from the local bakery, James walked again through the house, this time opening closets, checking the spare rooms, nodding to himself as if confirming something. "Mom," he said finally, his voice suddenly enthusiastic in a way that sent a small shiver down my spine. "I've been thinking, this house is perfect. There's so much space here, and you're all alone. You know what would solve everything?" I raised an eyebrow, waiting. "We should all move in with you. Me, Cynthia, the kids, even Vicky. It makes perfect sense. You wouldn't be alone anymore. We'd save on our mortgage, and the kids would have their grandmother right here. We could help with maintenance, cooking, everything." The words hit me like a physical blow, not because the suggestion itself was so outlandish. Multi-generational households were common enough, but because of the presumption behind it. There was no question in his voice, no "would you consider" or "what do you think about?" He had already decided. My home, my sanctuary that I had worked my entire life for, was now, in his mind, the solution to his financial problems. I kept my expression neutral, a skill perfected through countless interrogations. "That's certainly an interesting idea," I said carefully. "When exactly were you thinking this might happen?" His face lit up, mistaking my response for receptiveness. "Right away. We could start moving next weekend. I'm sure we could sell our house quickly in this market, even underwater. With what we'd save on the mortgage, we could contribute to utilities here, maybe even help with property taxes." "And Vicky, your mother-in-law would move in too?" I asked, keeping my voice even despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. Victoria Palmer had never bothered to hide her disdain for me, considering me too career-focused, too independent for her traditional values. "She's been struggling on her own too," James explained, already pulling out his phone. "And she could help with the kids while you and I are out. It's perfect. Let me call Cynthia right now and tell her the good news." As he stepped onto the porch to make the call, I remained at the table, my hands folded tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Through the window, I could see his animated gestures, the excitement in his face as he presumably told his wife they'd found the solution to all their problems. I closed my eyes, 40 years of investigative instinct crystallizing into a moment of perfect clarity. This wasn't a spontaneous idea. The careful inspection of the house, the detailed financial questions, the catalog of his monetary woes, all of it had been leading to this moment. I wondered how long they had been planning this, waiting for the perfect opportunity to present their solution, where I had conveniently done all the work and financial investment. When James returned, his face was jubilant. Cynthia's thrilled. She's already telling the kids. We can come back next weekend to measure for furniture placement. Vicky wants to see the kitchen before she commits, but I told her it's gorgeous. I forced a smile. Years of undercover work finally serving a personal purpose. That sounds wonderful, James. Why don't we plan for everyone to come next Saturday? I'll prepare a special dinner to celebrate the new arrangement. He embraced me tightly, genuinely moved. Thanks, Mom. You're saving us, you know that. Things have been so difficult lately. This is exactly what our family needs. As I hugged him back, my mind was already racing, formulating a plan that would make the most sophisticated financial fraudsters I'd ever investigated look like amateurs. Because if there was one thing I'd learned in my career, it was that when people reveal who they truly are, when they show you the depths of their entitlement and deception, you should always believe them the first time, and then you should prepare accordingly. After James left, I sat alone on my new porch swing, watching the sunset paint the Vermont mountains in shades of purple and gold. The peaceful scene was at stark odds with the storm brewing within me. I pulled out my phone and made a single call to an old colleague, a digital forensics expert who still owed me a favor from a case we'd worked together a decade ago. Frank, it's Eleanor Blackwood. I need your help with something unusual. Frank's voice crackled over the phone, the familiar gruff tone bringing me back to countless late nights in the office, hunting through financial records for that one anomaly that would break a case. Eleanor, been a while. You finally uncover a Ponzi scheme at the retirement community? Nothing that straightforward, I replied, the porch swing creaking gently beneath me as the evening shadows lengthened. This is personal. There was a momentary pause. In our line of work, personal was rarely a good thing. What do you need? He asked simply. Remote access to a few devices, call logs, text message recovery. Nothing that would get anyone arrested. Well, not by the Bureau, at least. I explained the situation, laying out James's sudden interest in my living arrangements, the transparent calculations behind his eyes as he surveyed my home, the presumptuous plan to invade my hard-earned sanctuary. Frank listened without interruption, a skill we'd both perfected during our careers. Your own son, he finally said, a mix of disbelief and something darker in his voice. Jesus, Eleanor. I know. Give me 48 hours. I'll need device information, any accounts you know he uses. The same for his wife and mother-in-law if possible. I provided everything I could remember. James's email, Cynthia's tendency to use the same password across platforms, her wedding anniversary followed by her initials, Victoria's Facebook account, where she overshared every detail of her life while somehow maintaining the illusion of privacy. After ending the call, I sat motionless for several minutes, watching the first stars appear in the darkening Vermont sky. The investigator in me was already assembling a case, coolly professional despite the personal stakes. But the mother in me felt a hollowness expanding in my chest, a void where certainty and trust had once resided. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the new house settling, every unfamiliar shadow seemed to mock my earlier contentment. I'd chosen this place as my haven, and within weeks, it was already being claimed by others. By morning, my grief had crystallized into resolve. If James wanted to play games with my life's work, he would soon discover he was facing a master of the craft. Frank was true to his word. Within 2 days, my secure email contained several encrypted files and a simple message. Worse than you thought. Call me. I prepared a pot of strong coffee, settled at my kitchen island, and dialed his number. It's a systematic plan, Frank said without preamble. Been in the works for months since before you even closed on the house. My fingers tightened around my coffee mug. Tell me, started around February. James has accessed your personal email repeatedly. Appears he had your password from when you asked him to check something while you were traveling last year. He's been monitoring your house hunting, your communications with realtors, your mortgage application. I closed my eyes, remembering how I'd asked James to check my email for an important message from a former colleague while I was at a conference with spotty reception. I'd never changed the password afterward, seeing no reason to shut out my own son. That's how he knew about Woodstock, I murmured. I never told him I was looking here specifically. Gets better, Frank continued, his tone suggesting it actually got much worse. Found text exchanges between James and Cynthia dating back to March. They've been in financial trouble for years, not just the minor issues he mentioned to you. James made some spectacularly bad investments, borrowed against their mortgage, has 3 maxed out credit cards. They're underwater by about $240,000. I took a long sip of coffee, letting the bitterness ground me, and they saw my retirement as the solution. Your new house, specifically, there are detailed discussions about how to convince Mom to let us move in, followed by transitioning to managing her assets, since you'd need help as you age. Cynthia suggested your guest room could be converted to a mother-in-law suite, where you'd eventually live while they took the master bedroom. A cold anger settled in my stomach, different from the emotional shock of yesterday. This was the familiar, focused fury that had fueled my most successful investigations, the ones where perpetrators had targeted vulnerable victims, believing them too weak or confused to fight back. And Victoria? She's the most explicit, referred to you as the cash cow in several messages to Cynthia. She's got financial problems too. Mortgage payments 3 months behind, substantial gambling debts from weekly casino trips she disguises as church social outings. The 3 of them, James, Cynthia, and Victoria, have a group chat where they've been planning this for weeks. I rubbed my temples, processing. What about actual financial impropriety? Has James already accessed my accounts? Frank's hesitation told me everything before he spoke. Eleanor, have you checked your investment accounts recently? Your savings? My blood ran cold. No. After the move, I've been focused on setting up the house. You should log in now. I'm seeing multiple transfers from your savings to an account I don't recognize. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger automatic fraud alerts. Started about 3 months ago, usually under $1,000. With trembling fingers that disgusted my professional self, I opened my laptop and navigated to my bank's website. The password didn't work. I tried again, carefully. Nothing. I can't get in, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Password's been changed. Hold on. I heard Frank's fingers flying across a keyboard. He changed it last week. I'm sending you the new one now. When I finally accessed my account, the reality was worse than I'd imagined. My savings had been systematically drained. $78,500 gone in small, regular withdrawals. My investment account showed recent changes to my portfolio, selling off long-term holdings and moving funds to a new account, listed only as Family Trust. A credit card I rarely used showed $23,000 in recent charges. Furniture stores, appliance retailers, electronics. He's been furnishing his new home, I said flatly. My home, with my money. Eleanor? Frank's voice softened. There's something else you should see. Forwarding it now. The email contained screenshots of conversations between my grandchildren, Michael, 16, and Emily, 14, and their friends. My chest tightened as I read Michael's messages. Yeah, Grandma finally bought a sick house. Dad says we're moving in next month. Old people don't need that much space anyway. Loyal know it's perfect. She has no idea. Dad says she's getting confused about money stuff, so he's helping her. By the time she figures anything out, if she ever does, we'll already be settled in. Emily's messages were only marginally better. Grandma's loaded and doesn't even know it. Dad says she has way more money than she needs for retirement. When she can't live alone anymore, the house goes to us. I already picked my room. I set down my coffee mug carefully, afraid I might shatter it in my grip. These were my grandchildren, the children I'd taken to museums and science centers, for whom I'd attended every school play and soccer game while their parents were too busy. The children who made me handmade Mother's Day cards signed, "We love you, Grandma." Those same children now saw me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited, an obstacle to be managed, an elderly burden whose confusion could be manipulated for gain. Frank, I said, my voice now perfectly steady, I need a favor, a big one. Name it. I need a comprehensive investigation. Bank records, credit reports, asset searches. I need to know exactly how bad their financial situation is, where my money has gone, and what they're planning next. And I need it within 5 days. 5 days? Eleanor, that's... They're coming Saturday, all of them, to celebrate, moving in together. I need everything by Friday. The silence stretched between us. Finally, Frank sighed. I'll pull in some favors. But Eleanor, what are you planning? I watched a cardinal land on my bird feeder, its bright red plumage stark against the green backdrop of Vermont summer. Justice, Frank. Nothing more, nothing less. The next morning, I began my own parallel investigation. While Frank worked his digital magic, I needed to understand the human element. I called Sarah, my realtor, under the pretense of having questions about property taxes. By the way, I asked casually after our business was concluded, my son James mentioned he spoke with you about the house before I made my offer. I was surprised you two had connected. Sarah's confusion was evident. Your son? I've never spoken with him. You came to the first showing alone, and your offer was submitted directly through your bank. That's strange. He seemed to know details about the closing that I hadn't shared. So, well, Sarah hesitated. Someone did call the office asking very specific questions about your purchase, claimed to be your financial advisor, wanted to know the exact closing price, your down payment amount, even the terms of your mortgage. I refused to provide that information without your written consent. When was this call? About 3 weeks ago. I meant to mention it, but with the rush to close before the end of the month, it slipped my mind. I thanked her and ended the call, another piece fitting into the puzzle. James had been investigating my finances from multiple angles, presumably looking for any resource he could tap into. Next, I called my bank directly and requested all recent account access logs, explaining I suspected unauthorized activity. The customer service representative was initially resistant until I mentioned my FBI background and the likelihood of fraud. Mrs. Blackwood, it appears your account has been accessed from multiple devices in the past 3 months, she informed me after reviewing the logs. Your primary device, a second device registered to your home IP address, and a third device that first accessed your account from a Boston location. The Boston location, can you tell me when that device first accessed my account? February 12th of this year, and it's been used to access your account regularly since then, approximately twice weekly. February 12th, the day I'd asked James to check my email while I was at that conference. He hadn't just checked for that one message, he'd used the opportunity to gain access to everything. I'd like to revoke access for all devices except my primary one, and I want to change all my passwords and security questions immediately, I instructed. For the next 2 days, I worked methodically, the way I'd approached every major case in my career. I created a secure document detailing every unauthorized access, every suspicious transfer, every deceptive conversation I'd uncovered. I printed bank statements, investment reports, and credit card bills, highlighting the fraudulent activity. I recorded phone calls with financial institutions, confirming the unauthorized nature of the transactions. Frank's investigation yielded even more damning evidence. James had recently applied for a second mortgage using my address as his primary residence, a clear case of fraud. Cynthia had opened credit cards in my name, though she hadn't used them yet. Victoria had researched inexpensive nursing homes and how to declare elderly parent incompetent on her laptop. By Thursday evening, I had assembled a comprehensive case that would have made any prosecutor salivate. Financial fraud, identity theft, elder abuse. The evidence was overwhelming. But I wasn't planning to take this to the authorities. Not yet. This betrayal required a more personal response. I made one final call that evening to Thomas Foster, my former neighbor from Boston who had relocated to Vermont 3 years earlier. Thomas had been a quiet, steady presence in my life since Harold's death, never pushing for more than friendship, but always available when I needed help or companionship. I have an unusual request, I told him after explaining the situation, and you have every right to refuse. Eleanor, after everything you did to help me through Margaret's illness, you can ask me for anything, he replied, referring to the months I'd spent helping him care for his late wife during her battle with cancer. I need a getaway driver, I said, unable to suppress a small smile at how the phrase sounded. and possibly a place to stay for a while afterward. Thomas didn't hesitate. My guest room is yours for as long as you need it. As for the driving, well, I've always wanted to be part of an FBI operation, even a retired one. With that final piece in place, I turned my attention to the most important element of my plan, the venue. The beautiful Victorian I'd purchased wasn't just my dream home, it was about to become the stage for the most important confrontation of my life. I contacted a local audiovisual company under the pretense of wanting to set up a sophisticated home theater system. The technician who arrived the next morning found himself installing something rather different, a comprehensive recording system with cameras in every room, all feeding to a central control panel, hidden in what would have been my office. Quite a setup, he commented as he finished the installation. Planning to start a reality show? Something like that, I replied. A very limited engagement. My final call was to Martha at the community center, who didn't even blink when I explained what I needed. The main hall is yours Saturday evening, Eleanor. We'll set up the streaming equipment exactly as you've requested. By Friday night, everything was in place. I prepared a gourmet meal, prime rib, rosemary potatoes, asparagus with hollandaise, and a triple chocolate cake that had been James's favorite since childhood. I set the dining table with my finest china and crystal, arranged fresh flowers in the center, and placed a bottle of expensive champagne in an ice bucket. In the living room, I set up a projector screen and comfortable seating, ostensibly for sharing photos of the house's history. The cameras were discreetly positioned, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. A small earpiece would allow me to communicate with Thomas, who would be monitoring the feed from his car parked down the street. As I finished my preparations, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. I looked exactly as I always had. Silver hair, neatly styled, subtle makeup, a well-tailored outfit that projected confidence and competence. There was no external sign of the seismic shift that had occurred within me, no visible marker of the boundary between the trusting mother I'd been and the strategic adversary I'd become. I touched the pearl necklace Harold had given me on our 30th anniversary, drawing strength from the memory of his unwavering support throughout my career. "You always said I was the most formidable person you knew," I whispered to his absent presence. "I hope you're right." That night, I slept soundly for the first time in a week. There was a certain peace in having all the facts, in knowing exactly what you were facing and exactly how you planned to respond. I'd built my career on this feeling, the calm certainty that comes from thorough preparation and absolute resolve. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the stained glass accents of my front door, casting those same rainbow patterns that had so delighted me when I first took possession of the house. I moved through my morning routine with deliberate care: shower, hair, makeup, a lightweight summer dress that projected both elegance and ease. At precisely 9:00 a.m., I sent a group text to James, Cynthia, and Victoria, looking forward to seeing everyone at 4:00 p.m. No need to bring anything but yourselves and your overnight bags. I've prepared a special dinner and a presentation about our new living arrangement that I think you'll find very informative. Can't wait to start this new chapter together. James responded immediately with enthusiastic thanks. Cynthia sent a brief acknowledgement. Victoria didn't respond at all. I spent the remainder of the morning cooking, setting up the final details of my presentation, and confirming with Thomas that he would be in position by 3:30 p.m. At 2:00 p.m., I activated all the cameras and ran a final sound check, ensuring every word spoken in any room would be captured with perfect clarity. At 3:45 p.m., I stood in my kitchen, surveying the feast I'd prepared. Everything was perfect: the food, the presentation, the trap. I felt a momentary pang, a last vestige of maternal instinct, wondering if there was another way. Then I remembered Michael's text about me being confused about money stuff, Emily's casual assertion that I had way more than I needed, Victoria's search for inexpensive nursing homes. The doorbell rang precisely at 4:00 p.m. I smoothed my dress, touched my pearl necklace one last time for courage, and went to welcome my family into the home they thought would soon be theirs. What they didn't know was that they were walking into the most meticulously planned sting operation of my entire career, one where I was simultaneously the victim, the investigator, and the judge who would pronounce the final verdict on their betrayal. I opened the door to find them standing there like conquering heroes surveying their new domain. James at the front, tall and confident in his business casual attire, a bottle of mid-priced champagne in hand, no doubt purchased with my money. Cynthia beside him, her practiced smile not quite reaching her eyes, as she clutched a small potted orchid. Victoria hovered just behind them, already eyeing the entryway as if mentally redecorating. The children stood at the edges, Michael slouched with teenage indifference, Emily bouncing with barely contained excitement, and behind them all, piled high in both their vehicles, were suitcases, boxes, and what appeared to be small pieces of furniture. They hadn't just come for dinner. They'd come to stake their claim. "Mom!" James stepped forward, embracing me with theatrical enthusiasm. "We're here, and we brought the essentials for our first night. The moving truck comes tomorrow with the rest." The moving truck, tomorrow. No discussion, no confirmation, just the assumption that my carefully crafted life was now theirs to rearrange. I returned his embrace with just enough warmth to seem convincing. How wonderful. But let's not worry about unloading now. Dinner's almost ready, and I've prepared something special. We should at least bring in our overnight bags, Cynthia suggested, already stepping past me into the foyer. The kids need their things for tomorrow, and I'd like to set up our toiletries in the bathroom. All in good time, I said smoothly, taking the orchid from her hands. Let's enjoy our meal first. I've set the dining room for a proper celebration. Victoria finally spoke, her critical gaze sweeping the hallway. Eleanor, those curtains simply won't do. Too dark for this exposure. I brought some lighter panels that would work much better. I'm sure you have wonderful ideas, Victoria, I replied with a smile that decades of professional interrogations had perfected. Pleasant, unrevealing, and just a touch intimidating. We'll have plenty of time to discuss decorating preferences later. I led them through to the dining room, where the sight of my carefully arranged table momentarily silenced even Victoria. Crystal gleamed under the soft chandelier light. Silver flatware reflected the flicker of tapered candles, and the aroma of prime rib filled the air. It was a tableau of elegant domesticity, the kind that graces magazine covers and holiday advertisements, the kind that speaks of tradition, stability, and family harmony, all a carefully constructed illusion, of course. Behind the wall sconce to my left was one of the smallest cameras, focused directly on the head of the table where James would sit. Another was concealed within the flower arrangement, and a third behind the china cabinet. Every word, every reaction would be captured in high definition. "Wow, Grandma, you went all out," Emily said, her calculated enthusiasm slipping into genuine appreciation as she eyed the chocolate cake on the sideboard. "Only the best for my family," I replied, gesturing for them to take their seats. "James, would you do the honors with the champagne? I've set flutes for the adults and sparkling cider for the children." As James busied himself with the cork, I caught Michael staring at the painting above the fireplace, an original work by a local Vermont artist that I'd splurged on as a housewarming gift to myself. "That probably cost a fortune," he muttered, not realizing I could hear him. "Could have bought a gaming system instead of some trees." I pretended not to notice, instead focusing on serving the meal I'd spent hours preparing. The irony wasn't lost on me, cooking a feast for people who saw me as nothing more than a resource to be consumed. But my FBI career had taught me that the most effective operations often hinged on creating a false sense of security. Make the target comfortable, confident, careless. "A toast," James proposed once everyone's glass was filled. "To new beginnings and family togetherness." "To family," I echoed, raising my glass while maintaining direct eye contact, another interrogation technique that often unsettled the guilty. The dinner conversation flowed with superficial pleasantness, punctuated by moments that would have been red flags had I not already seen the complete picture. James casually mentioned how they should consolidate our banking to simplify things. Victoria wondered aloud if the master bedroom furniture would accommodate James and Cynthia's needs or need to be replaced. Michael asked if the Wi-Fi could handle his gaming setup. while Emily inquired about repainting her room. I responded to each comment with non-committal murmurs or deflections, watching as they grew increasingly comfortable, increasingly bold in their assumptions. By the time I served dessert, they were openly discussing which moving company would bring their remaining furniture, where Victoria's craft supplies would be stored, and how the basement could be converted to a game room for the children. Before we get too far into planning, I interjected as coffee was served, I've prepared a little presentation about the house, its history, its features, some ideas I have for our arrangement. I emphasized the last word just slightly, watching James's face for reaction. "Great idea, Mom," he replied, missing my tone entirely. "We should all be on the same page." "Exactly my thinking," I said, standing from the table. "Why don't we move to the living room? I've set up everything there." They followed me like a processional, Victoria already critiquing my furniture placement under her breath, Cynthia running her hand possessively along the hallway wainscoting. I directed them to the seating I'd arranged facing the projector screen, making sure James and Cynthia took the central sofa directly in line with the main camera. "This is so thoughtful, Eleanor," Cynthia said, with practiced sincerity as she settled next to James. "A historical presentation on our new home." I smiled tightly as I picked up the remote control that would advance my slides and simultaneously send a signal to Thomas that we were beginning the main event. I believe understanding history is essential to planning the future. The screen illuminated with what appeared to be an old photograph of the house, circa 1890, when it was first built. I spoke briefly about the original family, their contribution to Woodstock's development, the architectural features they'd incorporated that still remained. "The Harrington family lived here for 3 generations, I explained, advancing to the next slide, until 1937, when something unexpected happened. The image changed, not to another historical photograph as they anticipated, but to a screenshot of text messages between James and Cynthia from March. James: "Mom's definitely buying the Woodstock house. Just saw the mortgage approval in her email." Cynthia: "Perfect. Plenty of room for all of us. How soon can we make our move?" James: "Give her a month to get settled. Then I'll suggest we help her out by moving in. She's always worried about being alone." Cynthia: "What about the Dawal's situation? Your mom needs to understand we'll need access to her accounts to manage household expenses." The silence in the room was absolute. I could almost hear the individual heartbeats accelerating as 5 pairs of eyes fixed on the screen in disbelief. "What is this?" James finally managed, his voice strained. "This," I replied calmly, "is Exhibit A in what I call the case of the presumptuous family. Let's continue, shall we?" I clicked to the next slide, a 3-month history of my savings account, with each unauthorized withdrawal highlighted in bright red, alongside matching deposits to an account in James's name. $78,500, I narrated, as if describing evidence in a courtroom, transferred in increments small enough to avoid automatic fraud detection, a technique commonly used by embezzlers and money launderers, as I explained many times during the financial crime seminars I conducted for the FBI. James half rose from his seat, his face flushing deep red. "Mom, I can explain." "Please do sit down, James. We're just getting started and I wouldn't want you to miss anything." My tone remained pleasant, but there was steel beneath it that made him slowly sink back onto the sofa. The next slide showed Victoria's Google searches. Cheapest nursing homes in Vermont. How to claim power of attorney from elderly parent. Selling house after parent declared incompetent. Victoria gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "Those are private searches. How dare you?" "Privacy is a fascinating concept, isn't it, Victoria?" I interrupted smoothly, like the privacy I thought I had in my own financial affairs, or the privacy of my email that was violated repeatedly over the past 4 months. I advanced to the next slide. Michael's social media messages about his confused grandmother. Emily's excited texts about claiming my house as their own. Emily burst into tears, while Michael stared at the floor, his face burning with shame, or perhaps just embarrassment at being caught. "Mom," James attempted again, his voice now taking on the placating tone he'd used when trying to talk his way out of trouble since childhood. "This is all being taken out of context. We were just trying to help you." "By stealing from me?" I asked. my voice finally showing a hint of the anger I'd been suppressing. By planning to ship me off to a cheap nursing home while you took over my house? By teaching your children that their grandmother is nothing more than a resource to be exploited? I clicked to the next image. James's fraudulent mortgage application using my address as his primary residence. This is federal fraud, James, punishable by up to 30 years in prison and fines up to $1 million. Cynthia began to weep silently, clutching James's arm. Victoria sat rigid, her expression oscillating between fury and fear. The children looked shell-shocked, suddenly confronted with adult consequences in a way they'd clearly never experienced. But the most interesting part, I continued, advancing to a slide showing a legal document, is that I don't actually own this house. What? 5 voices spoke almost in unison. I rented it, I explained, savoring the moment of complete confusion on their faces. For 1 month, specifically for this purpose. My actual new home is elsewhere, in a location none of you know, under a legal entity none of you can trace. The next slide appeared, a banking statement showing the transfer of my assets to the Eleanor Blackwood Living Trust. My finances are similarly protected. Every penny I own has been placed in an irrevocable trust with specific provisions that exclude anyone who has attempted to defraud me. That would be you, James, and you, Cynthia, for your complicity, and you, Victoria, for your scheming. You can't do that, Victoria sputtered, her composure finally breaking. Family has rights. Actually, I can, and I have, I cut in. And now we come to the most interesting part of our evening. I pressed another button on the remote, and the large mirror above the fireplace suddenly transformed, revealing itself as a screen. On it appeared a live stream of the Woodstock Community Center, where dozens of people sat watching. James's colleagues from the investment firm, Victoria's church group, the parents of Michael and Emily's friends, several of my new neighbors. Say hello to our audience, I suggested, gesturing to the camera hidden in the bookshelf. They've been watching our little family drama unfold in real time. The color drained from James's face as he recognized his boss in the community center audience. Cynthia made a small, choked sound as she spotted her sister. Victoria seemed to physically shrink as the camera panned across her bridge club members, all watching with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. You've been live streaming this? James whispered, horror dawning in his eyes. To everyone we know? Not everyone, I corrected. Just those who should be aware of your true character. Your boss, who might be interested in knowing that his investment manager commits financial fraud. Victoria's church friends, who might want to reconsider carpooling with someone who searches for cheapest nursing homes for her family members. The parents of children who might otherwise continue to socialize with Michael and Emily, absorbing their values about how to treat elderly relatives. I set down the remote and clasped my hands in front of me, the posture I'd adopted countless times when delivering the final summary to a suspect who'd been caught irrefutably. Here's what happens next. In those envelopes on the coffee table, you'll find documentation of everything I've discovered, along with the legal consequences I'm prepared to pursue. James, yours includes a formal complaint of financial fraud that will be filed with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit tomorrow morning, unless specific conditions are met. James reached for the envelope with trembling hands. Cynthia, yours details your complicity in accessing my accounts without authorization, along with evidence that will be provided to your hospital's ethics board regarding your discussion of my private medical information, which you accessed through the hospital system. Cynthia's sob was audible as she clutched her envelope without opening it. Victoria, yours contains recordings of your conversations about tax evasion at your craft store, which the IRS would find fascinating. Victoria's face had gone from red to ghostly white. Michael and Emily, yours are different. They contain letters expressing my profound disappointment, but also my hope that at your ages, this can be a learning experience rather than a defining moment. Your inheritance has been placed in educational trusts that will pay for college directly if you maintain a 3.5 GPA and complete 200 hours of community service annually working with elderly individuals. I walked to the center of the room, making sure to position myself perfectly for the main camera. You have exactly 1 hour to leave this house with your overnight bags. The moving truck you've scheduled for tomorrow should be cancelled, as you won't be moving anything else in. This rental agreement expires in 3 days, at which point the property management company will dispose of anything left behind. Where are we supposed to go? Victoria demanded, her voice shrill. That's not my concern, I replied evenly. You're all adults who make calculated decisions. Now you can deal with the adult consequences. Mom, James tried one last time, his voice breaking. We're your family. I looked at him for a long moment, seeing both the manipulative man he'd become and the little boy I'd once rocked to sleep. Family doesn't steal from family, James. Family doesn't plot to declare each other incompetent or ship each other off to the cheapest nursing home they can find. What you planned wasn't family. It was parasitism. I walked to the door and opened it, revealing Thomas waiting outside with a gentle smile. I'll be leaving now. The cameras will continue recording until you exit to ensure nothing is damaged or taken that doesn't belong to you. The live stream will end when I leave this property, so your further humiliation will at least be private. Unless, of course, you choose to challenge me legally, in which case all of this evidence becomes part of the public record. I picked up my purse and the small overnight bag I'd packed earlier, then turned to face them one last time. For 40 years, I investigated people who betrayed trust for financial gain. I learned to recognize the signs, document the evidence, and ensure consequences were proportional to the crime. Did none of you ever wonder if those skills might have remained intact after retirement? Their stunned silence was answer enough as I walked out the door with Thomas. Leaving behind the tableau of shocked faces and shattered plans, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness mixed with the quiet certainty that I had done what was necessary, not just for myself, but perhaps for them as well. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to ensure they face the consequences of their actions before those actions destroy them completely. Thomas helped me into his car, then slid into the driver's seat. Home? He asked gently. I looked back at the beautiful Victorian house that had briefly been my dream and then become the stage for this painful final act with my family. Yes, I replied, thinking of the cozy cottage overlooking the Pacific that now awaited me in California. Take me home. Thomas's car wound through the dark Vermont roads, headlights cutting through the evening mist that had settled over the rolling landscape. I sat in silence, watching the trees slip past like shadowy sentinels, guarding secrets as old as the mountains themselves. My hands were steady in my lap, the same preternatural calm I'd experienced after closing major cases during my career had descended over me, a professional's satisfaction in a job thoroughly executed. Are you all right, Eleanor? Thomas asked, his voice gentle against the hum of the engine. I'm not entirely sure, I answered honestly. I've just excised my only family from my life. All right. Seems an inadequate word for whatever this feeling is. Thomas nodded, his eyes remaining on the winding road. I remember feeling something similar after Margaret's diagnosis. Not grief exactly. Not yet. Something more fundamental, like the world had shifted on its axis and I was still figuring out how to walk on this new tilted plane. His perception struck me. That was precisely it. The sensation of navigating an altered reality where fundamental truths had been upended. My son was not the man I thought I'd raised. My grandchildren had been taught to see me as a resource rather than a person. The family bonds I'd believed unbreakable had proven to be elaborate illusions. Do you think I went too far? I asked, surprising myself with the question. During my career, I'd never second-guessed a properly executed operation. Thomas considered this as we passed through a small village, the warm lights from windows creating brief pools of gold in our peripheral vision. You gave them exactly what they planned for you, he said finally. Public humiliation, loss of independence, exploitation of resources. The only difference is you controlled the narrative. I turned to study his profile, outlined against the dashboard lights. That's surprisingly astute for a retired high school principal. He smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. I spent 40 years watching teenagers try to manipulate systems they didn't fully understand. Your family made the classic mistake. They underestimated their opponent. We drove in companionable silence for several miles, the rhythmic sweep of the wipers marking time as a light rain began to fall. I found myself remembering James as a child. His unrestrained laughter when Harold would toss him into the air. His serious concentration when learning to tie his shoes. His tearful determination when his first serious girlfriend broke his heart. Where had that boy gone? At what point had he looked at his mother and seen not a person to love, but an asset to acquire? "They'll try to contact you," Thomas said, interrupting my reverie. "Once the shock wears off and the practical realities set in." I know. I had anticipated this, of course. James will cycle through anger, bargaining, and eventually a performance of remorse. Victoria will attempt to use mutual acquaintances to vilify me as mentally unstable. Cynthia will probably send the children as emotional leverage. "You've thought of everything." "It was my job to think of everything," I replied simply. "For 40 years, I tracked people who believed themselves too clever to be caught. I learned that human behavior, even at its most devious, follows predictable patterns." We turned onto a narrower road, climbing slightly as we approached Thomas's farmhouse, nestled in the hills outside Woodstock. The headlights illuminated his mailbox, then swept across the front of the century-old home with its wide porch and welcoming windows. "Home for the night," Thomas announced, pulling into the gravel driveway. "Tomorrow we'll get you to the airport for your flight to California." As we entered his home, the warmth enveloped me, not just the physical warmth from the wood stove crackling in the corner, but the intangible comfort of a space that had been loved and lived in. Photos of Thomas's late wife Margaret smiled from the walls, alongside images of their children and grandchildren. Books lined the shelves, their spines bearing the gentle wear of multiple readings. This was what a real home felt like, not a stage for performance or an asset to be acquired, but a sanctuary built on authentic relationships. Thomas showed me to the guest room, a simple space with a patchwork quilt and windows that would frame the mountains come morning. "Try to get some rest," he suggested. Today was monumental. After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of the evening's events. The shock on James's face, the tears streaming down Emily's cheeks, the realization that the family gathered around my table had been plotting my diminishment, my erasure, my reduction to a convenience in their lives rather than a person with agency and dreams of my own. I didn't cry. Not then. The emotions moving through me were too complex, too primal for something as simple as tears. This was grief layered with vindication, loss intertwined with liberation. I had lost a family, but reclaimed myself. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the first of what would undoubtedly be many attempts at contact. James. I declined the call and set the phone to silent. Whatever crisis they were facing now was entirely of their own making. I slept deeply that night, dreamlessly, the sleep of someone who has completed a difficult but necessary task. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, illuminating the Vermont hills in their full summer glory. For a moment, I simply breathed in the beauty, allowing myself to feel gratitude for this new day, this new beginning. Downstairs, I found Thomas in the kitchen, frying bacon and brewing coffee. "Good morning," he greeted me with characteristic warmth. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks," I admitted, accepting the mug he offered. "Any word from the battlefield?" Thomas nodded toward his laptop open on the kitchen table. "Martha from the community center called earlier. Apparently your family stayed in the house for about 2 hours after you left, arguing amongst themselves. Victoria and Cynthia left in one car, James in another. The children went with their mother, and the live stream ended when you left, as promised. Though Martha mentioned that several people have already called her, asking if there's a recording available. Your presentation made quite an impression on the community." I sipped my coffee, contemplating this ripple effect. That wasn't my intention. I didn't want to create a spectacle, just ensure there were witnesses. "People respond to authenticity," Thomas said, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon in front of me. In an age of carefully curated social media personas, watching someone stand up for their dignity with such meticulous evidence was apparently refreshing. After breakfast, Thomas drove me to the small regional airport where I'd booked a flight to San Francisco. The morning was gloriously clear, the kind of perfect summer day that Vermont specializes in. rolling green hills under an impossibly blue sky, wildflowers nodding in the gentle breeze. I'll miss this, I admitted as we turned into the airport entrance. The beauty of this place. It really would have been my dream home under different circumstances. Vermont will be here, Thomas said simply. When the dust settles, if you want to try again. I considered this as he pulled up to the departures curb. Could I return to this place that had been the setting for such betrayal? Perhaps someday, but not yet. The wounds were too fresh, the associations too painful. Thomas helped me with my bags, then hesitated before offering a warm hug. Safe travels, Eleanor. Keep in touch. I will, I promised, finding I genuinely meant it. In this man, this neighbor who had become something more, I'd found the authentic connection that had been so painfully absent in my own family. As the plane lifted off, I watched Vermont recede beneath me. The green mountains, the winding rivers, the small towns with their white church steeples and town squares. Somewhere down there was the Victorian house I'd briefly called home. Somewhere down there, my family was facing the consequences of their actions. My phone buzzed again as we reached cruising altitude. 17 missed calls overnight. James, Cynthia, even Victoria. Dozens of text messages ranging from fury to pleading. I scrolled through them dispassionately, a researcher examining specimens. Mom, you've ruined everything. How could you humiliate us like that? James, please, Eleanor. The kids are devastated. Can't we talk about this? Cynthia, your mental state is clearly compromised. We're consulting an attorney about your competency. Victoria, the last one made me smile grimly. Exactly as predicted. Victoria was already attempting to paint me as unstable, but she would quickly discover that my preparation extended to this contingency as well. The trust I'd established had been preceded by a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation, confirming my complete competence. Any challenge would simply waste their resources and further expose their motivations. 3 hours later, I stepped off the plane in San Francisco, where a car service waited to take me to Pacific Grove, a small coastal town south of Monterey, where my real new home awaited. I'd purchased the property 6 months earlier through an LLC, a backup plan I'd created when I first noticed James's unusual interest in my retirement finances. The drive down the coast was breathtaking. Crashing waves against rugged cliffs, cypress trees bent by decades of ocean winds, otters playing in the kelp beds offshore. As we pulled up to my new home, a modest craftsman bungalow with a view of the bay, I felt a surge of quiet triumph. This place was truly mine, unknown to those who had tried to claim my previous life. The property manager greeted me warmly, handing over the keys and a thick folder of local information. Everything's ready, Miss Blackwood. The utilities are connected, internet is working, and I stocked the refrigerator as requested. I thanked her and stepped into my new home, taking in the hardwood floors, the built-in bookshelves, the window seat overlooking the Pacific. It wasn't the Grand Victorian I'd left behind, but it had a soul of its own, weathered and genuine like the coastline it overlooked. That evening, I sat on my small deck with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My phone had finally fallen silent, perhaps as they realized I would not be manipulated into responding. In its place, a profound peace settled over me, the peace of someone who has faced a devastating truth and survived it. The next morning, I woke to the sound of sea lions barking in the distance and sunlight streaming through windows framing a view of the endless Pacific. After coffee, I walked to the small local market, introducing myself to the shopkeeper as Ellie, a nickname I hadn't used since college. It felt right, this subtle reinvention. Eleanor had been an FBI investigator, a mother, a grandmother. Ellie was someone new, someone still discovering who she might become. Over the following weeks, I established new rhythms: morning walks along the coastal trail, afternoon reading on my deck, volunteer work at the local library. Slowly, I began to meet people, not as James's mother or Michael and Emily's grandmother, but simply as myself, Ellie, the retired federal employee with a dry sense of humor and a talent for explaining complex financial concepts in accessible terms. 1 month after my arrival, I received a thick envelope forwarded through my attorney. Inside was a handwritten letter from Emily. not sent via her parents, but mailed directly to my lawyer, whose contact information had been in their envelope. "Dear Grandma," she began, "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to say I'm sorry. Not because Mom and Dad told me to, they don't know I'm writing, but because what I did was wrong. The things I said about you were terrible. I got caught up in the excitement of having a big room and didn't think about how it would hurt you." She continued for several pages, her teenage handwriting becoming more assured as she detailed the aftermath of my departure. Her parents had separated, with Cynthia taking the children to stay with her sister. James had lost his job when his employer discovered the fraudulent mortgage application. Victoria had become increasingly bitter, blaming everyone but herself for the situation. "Dad keeps saying you'll come to your senses and help us, but I don't think he understands what he did wrong," Emily wrote. "I've been thinking a lot about it, though. You taught me about respect when I was little, and I forgot that lesson. I just wanted to tell you that I understand now, and I'm really, really sorry." I read the letter several times, feeling the first crack in the protective wall I'd built around my heart. Emily was 16, old enough to know better, but young enough to have been heavily influenced by her parents' attitudes. Her remorse seemed genuine, uncalculated. That evening, I sat at my new desk overlooking the ocean and composed a reply, not giving my address or phone number, but acknowledging her apology and expressing hope for her future. I enclosed information about the educational trust I'd established for her, explaining that it remained intact despite everything that had happened. "You're at a crossroads, Emily," I wrote. "You can follow the path your parents chose, seeing relationships as transactional, people as resources to be used, or you can choose a different way, building connections based on mutual respect and genuine care. I hope you choose wisely." As I sealed the envelope, I realized I was crying, the tears I hadn't been able to shed that night in Thomas's guest room finally finding release. I wasn't crying for what I'd lost. That family had never truly existed except in my hopeful imagination. I was crying for what might have been, for the genuine bonds that could have flourished had greed and entitlement not poisoned the soil in which they grew. But even as I grieved that loss, I recognized the unexpected gifts that had emerged from this painful chapter. A newfound clarity about my own worth, freedom from obligations based on manipulation rather than love, and the opportunity to build a life aligned with my true values. 3 months after leaving Vermont, I received a call from Frank, my former FBI colleague, who had helped uncover my family's plot. "Thought you'd want to know," he said without preamble. "James just took a plea deal on the fraud charges. Probation, restitution, community service. Victoria's craft store is under full IRS audit, and your former house in Woodstock just sold to a lovely retired couple from Boston." "Thank you for telling me," I replied, watching pelicans glide over the Pacific. "But I've found I'm thinking about them less and less these days." "Good," Frank said simply. "That's exactly as it should be." After we hung up, I walked down to the shoreline, letting the cold Pacific foam wash over my feet. The water erased my footprints as quickly as I made them, a reminder that even the deepest impressions can be washed away by time and the natural rhythms of the world. Standing there between land and sea, I made peace with my decision. I had protected myself from those who sought to diminish me. I had refused to become the convenient, compliant elderly relative they had wanted to exploit. I had reclaimed my right to self-determination, and in doing so, I had discovered that family, true family, isn't defined by blood or legal ties, but by respect, reciprocity, and genuine care. I was building that authentic family now, one honest connection at a time, in this new place where I was known simply as myself. The California sunset painted the sky in impossible colors as I turned back toward my home, my real home, earned through decades of work and protected by my own foresight. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new connections, new chapters in a story that was, at last, entirely my own to write. It's been 3 years since that pivotal evening in Vermont when I stood up to my family and reclaimed my dignity. Many of you have asked for an update on my life, so today I wanted to share where this journey has taken me and the unexpected gifts that emerged from what initially felt like complete devastation. I still live in my Pacific Grove cottage overlooking the ocean. The garden I've cultivated is now mature, Lavender and rosemary scent the air, and the Meyer lemon tree I planted that first autumn bears fruit year-round. My life here has developed a rhythm that nurtures rather than depletes me. Morning walks along the coastal trail, afternoon volunteering at the local literacy center, evenings spent reading or enjoying conversations with the close friends I've made. Thomas visits every few months, our friendship deepening into something neither of us felt the need to label. At our age, we understand that connection doesn't always need definition to be meaningful. We enjoy each other's company, share our thoughts and experiences, and offer the steady support that comes from mutual respect rather than obligation. As for my family, the aftermath played out much as I'd predicted. James faced the legal consequences of his actions, ultimately accepting a plea deal that included probation, community service, and financial restitution. His marriage to Cynthia didn't survive the strain, and they divorced 6 months after my departure. Victoria's craft store closed following an extensive IRS audit that uncovered years of tax evasion. Emily and Michael have taken different paths. Emily completed high school with honors and is now attending college, her education funded by the trust I established. We exchanged letters quarterly, cautious at first, but gradually evolving into thoughtful correspondence between two adults learning to know each other authentically. She studies psychology and volunteers at a senior center, choices that suggest she's reflecting deeply on the events that shaped her adolescence. Michael has remained distant, still caught in the narrative his parents created. Perhaps someday he'll gain the perspective to see beyond it, but that journey must be his own. I've left his educational trust intact, available when and if he chooses a different path. People often ask if I regret my actions that night. The public exposure, the severing of family ties, the irrevocable step of moving across the country to start anew at 68. The question always makes me smile because it reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of what happened. I didn't destroy my family. I merely revealed what it had already become. The bonds I thought existed, based on love, respect, and genuine care, had long since been replaced by calculations of utility and opportunity. What I gained in exchange for that painful truth was immeasurable. Freedom from manipulation, clarity about my own worth, and the opportunity to build connections based on authentic mutual respect rather than exploitation disguised as familial duty. The most unexpected outcome has been finding my voice through this channel. When I first shared my story 3 years ago, I never anticipated the response it would generate. Thousands of comments from people facing similar situations, grateful to see someone refuse to be diminished by those who claim to love them. Elderly individuals finding the courage to examine their own family dynamics. Adult children reconsidering their attitudes toward aging parents. Your responses transformed a personal story of betrayal into something far more meaningful. A catalyst for conversation about how we value each other across generations, how we define family beyond blood ties, and how we protect our dignity even when those closest to us fail to honor it. Many of you have asked what advice I would give to others facing exploitation by family members. First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, pay attention to that feeling. Second, document everything: conversations, financial transactions, behavioral patterns. Evidence provides clarity when emotions become overwhelming. Third, build a support network beyond your immediate family. The isolation that makes exploitation possible can only thrive when we have nowhere else to turn. Most importantly, remember that your worth is not determined by your utility to others. You have inherent value that doesn't diminish with age or circumstance. You deserve relationships that honor rather than exploit that value. The path I chose was extreme: a complete break, a public reckoning, a cross-country relocation. Not everyone needs such dramatic measures to reclaim their agency. Sometimes a firmly established boundary, consistently maintained, is sufficient. Sometimes professional intervention through elder law, attorneys, or family counseling can redirect unhealthy dynamics. The specifics matter less than the fundamental principle. You have the right to protect yourself from those who would diminish you, even, perhaps especially, when they are family. Life in my 70s has proven richer and more fulfilling than I ever anticipated during those dark days in Vermont. I've discovered new passions: watercolor painting, Portuguese language study, volunteering with marine conservation efforts. I've built friendships based on shared interests and mutual support rather than obligation or history. I found that age brings not just inevitable losses, but also unexpected freedoms. The freedom to prioritize authenticity over appearance, peace over drama, meaningful connection over hollow obligation. If my story has resonated with you, I invite you to become part of this growing community. Subscribe to Revenge Expected to hear more journeys of individuals who refuse to be victims of exploitation and instead reclaim their power. Each story we share illuminates another aspect of this complex territory, where family dynamics, aging, and personal autonomy intersect. Your comments on these videos create an invaluable resource for others navigating similar challenges. Please share your thoughts, experiences, and insights below. What resonated most strongly with you in my story? Have you witnessed or experienced similar family dynamics? What boundaries have you established to protect your dignity or that of loved ones? If you found value in today's video, please consider supporting the channel with a like and by sharing with others who might benefit from these conversations. Our community grows through your engagement, allowing us to reach more people who need to hear that they are not alone in facing these painful realities. For those able to offer additional support, the Super Thanks feature provides a way to contribute financially to the costs of producing these videos. Your generous donations help cover the expenses of research, production, and editing, allowing us to maintain our daily upload schedule and expand the range of stories we can share. Every contribution, regardless of size, directly supports our mission of empowering individuals to recognize and respond effectively to exploitation. Next week, we'll share Patricia's story, a 65-year-old retired nurse whose adult daughter and son-in-law moved into her home temporarily and stayed for 7 years, gradually taking over her space, finances, and independence until a chance encounter with a former patient helped her recognize and address the situation. When I look back at the woman who stood in that Vermont living room 3 years ago, heart pounding but voice steady as she confronted decades of betrayal, I hardly recognize her. Not because she was wrong, she was absolutely right to take that stand, but because she was still defining herself primarily as a mother, a grandmother, an ex-wife. The woman I've become since then is more complete, more authentic, more fully herself than family roles alone could ever accommodate. That perhaps is the most profound revenge of all. Not the public exposure of those who sought to exploit me, but the joyful reclamation of a self beyond their limited imagination. They saw an aging woman whose utility was fading. I discovered a person whose possibilities were just beginning to unfold. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, this is Eleanor Blackwood, or Ellie, as my friends now call me, reminding you that it's never too late to stand in your truth and build a life that honors your full, magnificent worth.